The scent of white lilies has always been associated with purity and new beginnings, but to me, that cloying fragrance will forever be the scent of betrayal. It was supposed to be the day two powerful dynasties merged in celebration, but instead, it became the day I watched my entire reality incinerate in the span of a heartbeat. I stood in the shadows of the velvet curtains, clutching a flute of untouched champagne, and watched the man I had shared my bed with for 5 years press his lips against the woman who was about to become my sister-in-law. They were hidden in the alcove of the hotel's terrace, thinking the darkness was their ally, unaware that the darkness was actually where I had just learned to see for the very first time. Most women would have screamed. They would have shattered the glass, marched over, and clawed at the faces of the traitors. I wanted to do that. Every fiber of my being screamed for violence, for a primal release of the agony tearing through my chest. But I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because just as my world was collapsing, I remembered the strange, cold look my brother had given me earlier that morning. A look that said, "Wait, this is the story of how a wedding in Chicago became a funeral for a conspiracy, and how I, Elena Vance, had to die inside to be reborn as the woman who brought an empire to its knees." The Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Chicago was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a prismatic glow over the hundreds of guests dressed in couture. Outside, the wind howled off Lake Michigan, but inside, the air was still and warm, perfumed with thousands of dollars worth of imported flowers. It was the wedding of the decade. My brother, Lucas Vance, the 32-year-old CEO of Vance Heritage Holdings, was marrying Isabella Ricci, a 24-year-old socialite whose beauty was only matched by her apparent innocence. I was 28, the younger sister, the protected one. Lucas had been my father, my mother, and my guardian since our parents died in a tragic car accident 20 years ago. He was the stoic titan of industry, while I was the artist, the dreamer. Seeing him find happiness with Isabella had been the greatest relief of my life. She was delicate, soft-spoken, and looked at Lucas as if he hung the moon. I welcomed her like the sister I never had, and standing beside me, or so I thought, was my husband, Gavin Thorne. Gavin was a celebrated architect, the man who had designed the city's new skyline. We had been married for 5 years, a union that everyone called a fairy tale. He was my anchor. When I had panic attacks about the past, Gavin held me. When I doubted my art, Gavin praised me. Just 10 minutes ago, he had kissed my temple and whispered that I looked more beautiful than the bride, claiming he needed to step out to take a call from a contractor. I had wandered onto the terrace to find him, hoping to steal a quiet moment before the ceremony began. That was when I heard the giggle. It was a sound I knew. Isabella's laugh, light and chime-like. Then came the low, husky murmur of my husband. I had frozen, peering through the gap in the French doors. There they were. Isabella, in her custom Vera Wang gown worth more than most people's houses, was pressed against the stone railing. Gavin's hands were tangling in her meticulously styled hair, his mouth devouring hers with a hunger he hadn't shown me in years. "You are dangerous doing this right now," Isabella purred, pulling back slightly but keeping her arms looped around his neck. Gavin chuckled, a sound devoid of the warmth I knew. It was arrogant, predatory. That's the thrill, isn't it? Besides, look at them inside. The Vance family is clueless. Lucas is a love-struck fool, and Elena... God, Elena is so desperate for affection she wouldn't see the truth if I painted it on a billboard. The air left my lungs. Desperate for affection. The words were a physical blow. "I'm still nervous," Isabella whispered, tracing the line of his jaw. "If this blows up, I don't want to live with you and her. I hate pretending to be the doting sister-in-law." "Don't worry," Gavin sneered. "I only married her for the Vance connection. She's my golden ticket, my shield. Once you secure Lucas's trust and we get access to the offshore accounts, we'll drain the company dry. I'll divorce Elena, leave her with nothing but her pathetic paintings, and we'll be on a beach in the Maldives. Just give me a few more months to get her pregnant. A kid locks down the inheritance. I stumbled back, my hand clamping over my mouth to stifle a sob that felt like it would tear my throat apart. A baby. He wanted to use a child as a pawn. The nausea was overwhelming. The man I loved was a monster. The woman I embraced was a snake. I turned and ran, blindly navigating the corridor, tears blurring my vision until I collided with a solid wall of a chest. I looked up, ready to apologize, and saw Lucas. My brother looked impeccable in his tuxedo, but his eyes were hard as flint. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't look surprised by my tears. He simply gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging into the silk of my dress. "You saw them, didn't you?" Lucas asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I choked out a nod, explaining through ragged breaths what I had heard. The affair, the plan to bankrupt the company, the baby. I expected Lucas to explode, to storm the terrace and throw Gavin off the ledge. Instead, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped my face. "Fix your makeup, Elena," he said softly. I stared at him, horrified. "Lucas, did you hear me? They are destroying us. We have to stop the wedding." "The wedding will proceed," Lucas said, a cold smile touching his lips. "It's too late to cancel the catering after all." I thought he had gone mad with grief. "Lucas, please." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "I have known for 3 months, Elena." Time stopped again. 3 months? I noticed the discrepancies in the accounts, Lucas explained, guiding me into a private waiting room and locking the door. I noticed how Isabella asked too many questions about security protocols. I noticed how Gavin looked at her when he thought no one was watching. I hired a private investigator. He pulled out a tablet and scrolled through images that made my stomach turn. Gavin and Isabella in hotels. Gavin and Isabella looking at real estate in Switzerland. Emails detailing the liquidation of Vance Heritage assets. They aren't just cheaters, Elena. They are corporate spies working for a larger entity, Lucas said, his eyes darkening. But if I had confronted them earlier, we would have only caught the pawns. I needed the king. I needed to know who sent them. So I played along. I let them think they were winning. He looked at me, his expression softening into pity. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I needed your reaction to be genuine today. If you knew, you couldn't have played the part of the happy wife. But now I need you to be strong. The ceremony is about to start. I need you to walk out there, sit next to your husband, and smile. Can you do that? Can you hold it together for 1 more hour to watch them burn?" The sadness in my chest began to harden into something jagged and hot. Rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. I wiped my eyes. I fixed my hair in the mirror. I looked at the woman reflected back at me. A woman who had been a fool, yes, but who was a Vance. "Let's burn them down," I said. Lucas offered me his arm. "Showtime, little sister." We walked back out. The transformation was instantaneous. I plastered a smile on my face that felt like a porcelain mask. I found Gavin near the front row. He looked at me with faux concern. "There you are, honey," he said, reaching for my hand. I was worried. "You look pale." I looked at his hand, the hand I used to hold for comfort, and fought the urge to vomit. "Just wedding jitters," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's such an emotional day." The music swelled. The doors opened. Isabella walked down the aisle, a vision in white lace looking every bit the blushing bride. The guests gasped in admiration. I watched her walk toward my brother, knowing she was walking toward her own execution. The ceremony was a blur of hollow vows. I sat next to Gavin, letting him put his arm around me. He whispered about how beautiful the ceremony was, how much he loved me. Every word was a dagger, but I didn't bleed. I waited. Then came the moment. The officiant asked if anyone had any objections. Usually this is a formality. A silent pause. But today, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. "I object!" The silence that followed was deafening. A middle-aged woman marched down the aisle. She was dressed poorly, her face lined with hardship. Beside her was a young man in a wheelchair. Isabella froze at the altar. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. "Mrs. Higgins?" Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. "You recognize me." "Good," the woman shouted. She turned to the crowd. "This woman, this angel you see here, was engaged to my son, Mark, for 4 years. She drained his savings account, took the money for his surgery, and vanished 3 months ago. My son lost his ability to walk because she stole his medical fund to buy the clothes she used to seduce this rich man." Gasps rippled through the room. Isabella turned pale. "No, that's a lie. I don't know these people." Lucas stood there, unmoving, watching her with a detached curiosity. "Liar!" the woman screamed, throwing a stack of photos onto the altar. Photos of Isabella and the man in the wheelchair, smiling, happy, poor. Isabella looked at Lucas, tears streaming down her face. "Lucas, baby, please, these are crazy people trying to extort us. You trust me, right?" Lucas looked at her, then slowly picked up a microphone. "I believe in evidence, Isabella. And speaking of evidence," he gestured to the tech booth. The massive screens behind the altar, which had been displaying a slideshow of the couple, flickered. Suddenly, the video changed. It wasn't the balcony scene yet. It was footage from inside a car, Gavin's car. The audio boomed through the speakers. "God, she's so annoying." Gavin's voice filled the hall. "Elena just talks and talks about her art. I can't wait to dump her." Isabella's voice laughed. "Just endure it a little longer, babe. Once we get the Vance money, we can put her in a mental institution if she makes a fuss." The crowd erupted. It was pandemonium. I sat in my seat, turning slowly to look at Gavin. His face had drained of all blood. He looked like a ghost. He stood up, knocking his chair over. That's fake. It's AI. It's a deep fake," he stammered, backing away. Lucas stepped down from the altar. "Is it? Then let's watch the sequel." The screen changed again. The balcony scene from 20 minutes ago played in high definition. The kiss. The mockery of me. The plan to use a baby as a weapon. Gavin turned to run, but 2 security guards blocked the aisle. Isabella collapsed to her knees, sobbing, her facade completely shattered. Lucas walked over to me. He extended his hand and I took it, rising to stand beside him. The room went silent, waiting for the verdict. Lucas looked at the crowd. "We apologize for the disruption. There will be no wedding today. But there will be justice." He turned to a table near the front where an older, distinguished man sat. The man was sipping his wine, looking bored. "Mr. Silas Sterling," Lucas said, his voice booming. "You look comfortable." The man froze. Silas Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Dominion, our biggest rival. He was also Gavin's uncle, though they kept that relation quiet. "You think using your nephew to seduce my sister and a grifter to seduce me was a clever plan?" Lucas asked, holding up a flash drive. "We have the emails, Silas. We know you orchestrated the corporate espionage. We know you paid off the inspectors to devalue our stock last year. Police officers entered from the side doors. They weren't just hotel security, they were federal agents. They moved towards Silas Sterling, who was now trembling with rage. "This is entrapment," Silas roared as they cuffed him. Lucas looked at Gavin and Isabella. "And you two, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, and corporate espionage." Gavin looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Elena, baby, please. I was forced. Silas made me do it. I love you." I walked up to him. I looked into the eyes of the man I had planned to grow old with. I raised my hand and slapped him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "My lawyer will send the papers, Gavin," I said, my voice cold as ice. "Don't worry about the art. I'll paint a masterpiece of you behind bars." As they were dragged away, Isabella screaming and Gavin weeping, the adrenaline finally left me. I slumped against Lucas and he held me up. "It's over," he whispered. But as I watched the police lights flash against the ballroom walls, I knew it wasn't over. The betrayal had carved a hollow space inside me that justice alone couldn't fill. I was free, but I was broken. In the weeks that followed, the scandal dominated the news. The fall of Sterling Dominion was swift. Lucas was hailed as a genius strategist. I was painted as the tragic heroine. I hated it. I hated the pitying looks from strangers. I hated the empty house that smelled of Gavin's cologne. I signed the divorce papers with a numb hand. I sold the house. I packed 2 suitcases. "I need to go, Lucas," I told my brother one rainy afternoon in his office. "I can't breathe in Chicago." "Where will you go?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Italy," I said. "Tuscany. Somewhere with sun and no skyscrapers." Lucas didn't stop me. He hugged me tightly. "Come back when you find yourself again." I arrived in Tuscany in late September, when the vineyards were turning gold and russet. I rented a small stone cottage on the outskirts of a village called Montepulciano. I didn't paint. I didn't check the news. I just walked. I walked until my legs burned, trying to outpace the memories. For months, I was a ghost haunting the Italian countryside. But slowly, the silence began to heal me. I started sketching again. Charcoal drawings of olive trees, of old men playing cards in the square. One afternoon, sitting in a small cafe sketching the fountain, a shadow fell over my sketchbook. "You got the angle of the cherub wrong," a voice said. I looked up, annoyed. Standing there was a man with messy dark hair wearing a worn leather jacket and holding a helmet. He had kind eyes, the color of warm amber. "Excuse me?" I said. He pointed to the statue. "The cherub's wing is tilted more to the left. You drew it straight. It makes him look stiff." I looked at the statue, then my drawing. He was right. "I'm Elena," I said, softening. "Nolan," he replied, pulling out a chair. "Mind if I sit?" "The coffee here is the only thing keeping me awake." Nolan Hart was an American, a former homicide detective from New York who had burned out and moved to Italy to restore vintage motorcycles. We were 2 refugees from our own lives. We started talking, tentatively at first, then with a voracious hunger. He didn't know who I was. To him, I wasn't the heiress or the victim. I was just Elena. We spent the winter together. He took me on rides through the winding hill roads, the wind whipping away the last remnants of my grief. He taught me how to fix a carburetor. I taught him how to appreciate Renaissance art. One night, by the fireplace in my cottage, I told him everything. The wedding, the betrayal, Gavin. Nolan listened in silence, holding my hand. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes. He kissed my knuckles. "You survived." "Elena," he said, "that's the hardest part. Now you get to live." I fell in love with him. It wasn't the flashy, picture-perfect romance I had with Gavin. It was quiet, steady, and real. It was founded on truth. 2 years passed. We had a daughter, a beautiful little girl named Lily with Nolan's eyes and my chin. Life was perfect. Lucas visited often, bringing news of the company's success. He had married a kind pediatrician named Sarah, and the family felt whole again. But the past has a way of not staying buried. On Lily's 2nd birthday, we were back in Chicago for a visit. We held a small party at Lucas's penthouse. The atmosphere was joyous until a courier arrived with a package. It was wrapped in silver paper with a pink ribbon. There was no return address. Lucas opened it. Inside was a platinum bracelet. Delicate and incredibly expensive. The charm was a lotus flower encrusted with rare pink diamonds. "Who sent this?" Sarah asked, admiring it. There was a card. Lucas picked it up, and I saw the color drain from his face. He handed it to me. "Happy birthday to my precious granddaughter. The lotus grows from the mud but remains unstained, just like our family. Grandmother Serafina." I stared at the card. Grandmother Serafina? My mother's name was Martha. She had died in the car accident with my father. I had no living grandmother. Is this a sick joke? I asked, my voice trembling. Is this Silas Sterling trying to mess with us from prison? Lucas shook his head. No. Silas is in solitary. He couldn't arrange this. And look at the handwriting. It was elegant, old-fashioned script. It felt strangely familiar, though I couldn't place it. Nolan, his detective instincts flaring, took the box. I'll run a trace on the courier, he said. But this looks specific. The Lotus. Does that mean anything to you? I shook my head, but Lucas was silent. He walked over to a safe in the wall, punched in the code, and pulled out an old, tattered journal. It was our father's diary, recovered from the wreckage of the car accident years ago. He flipped to the last entry, written the day he died. If anything happens to us, tell the children to look for the Lotus in Geneva. Serafina will know what to do. Martha is safe, but Serafina is the key. We stared at each other. We had always assumed Martha was our mother. But who was Serafina? And why did our father differentiate them? The truth we realized was far more complicated than the corporate greed of Silas Sterling. We began an investigation that night. Nolan used his old contacts. Lucas used his resources. We discovered that our parents hadn't just died in an accident. The police report from 20 years ago had been doctored. There were 4 bodies in the car, not 2. A driver and a nanny were also listed, but the identities were garbled. 3 days later, Nolan found a lead. A safety deposit box in a Swiss bank in Geneva, registered to a Serafina Vance. We flew to Geneva immediately, Lucas, Nolan, and I. The bank was a fortress of silence. When Lucas presented our father's death certificate and our DNA tests, the vault was opened. Inside was not money, but stacks of letters and a videotape. We played the tape in the private viewing room. The grainy image of a woman appeared. She looked exactly like me, but older, with a sadness in her eyes that pierced my soul. My darling Lucas, my sweet Elena, the woman on the screen said, if you are watching this, then I am dead, or I have finally decided it is safe to reach out. I am Serafina. I am your biological mother. I gasped, clutching Nolan's hand. Martha was my sister, the woman continued. She raised you because I couldn't. 25 years ago, I discovered something terrible. Your father and I built Vance Heritage, but we had a silent partner, Silas Sterling. But Silas wasn't just a businessman. He was laundering money for a criminal syndicate. When I found out, I tried to go to the FBI. Silas found out. She paused, wiping a tear. He rigged the car. He meant to kill all of us, but that day, I wasn't in the car. Martha was. She was taking my place for a trip to the country while I went to meet the agents. The car exploded. Martha and your father died. I watched it happen from the window. I wanted to die with them. But I knew if Silas knew I was alive, he would come for you. So I made a deal with the devil. I let the world believe I died in that car. I let Martha take my name in death. I fled to Europe to draw Silas's attention away from you. I left you with Lucas, knowing he was strong enough to protect Elena. I have watched you from the shadows every day. I sent the anonymous tips that helped Lucas build the company. I sent the investigators to expose Gavin and Isabella. I have been your guardian angel, living in hell so you could live in heaven. The video ended. The room was silent save for my sobbing. My entire life was a lie. But it was a lie born of the purest love imaginable. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She had sacrificed her very identity to keep me breathing. But the letters in the box revealed one final terrifying secret. Silas Sterling was in prison, yes, but the syndicate he worked for was still active, and they were currently operating out of a skyscraper in Chicago, the Golden Crest Tower, right next to our own building. They were planning a hostile takeover of everything we had built, using the chaos of the recent years as cover. We have to finish this, Lucas said, his eyes burning with the same intensity I saw on the wedding day. For Mom, for Dad, for Martha. But we couldn't use the law this time. The syndicate owned the judges. We needed hard evidence of their current operations to bring in the feds at a level they couldn't ignore. The evidence was on a server in the Golden Crest Tower's penthouse office, a room totally off the grid. We can't walk in the front door, Nolan said, looking at the blueprints. It's a fortress. Lucas looked out the window at the skyline. Then we go over the top. The plan was insane. The Vance Tower and the Golden Crest Tower were separated by a 50-foot gap. We would stage a gala at the Vance Tower to create a distraction. While the security systems were focused on the VIPs, Nolan and I would cross from our roof to theirs using a high-tension wire rig. A skill Nolan had from his SWAT days, and one he had taught me during our adventurous days in Italy, though never at this height. "Why me?" I asked. "Because the system requires a retinal scan to access the server room. The letters say Serafina was a co-founder of the original building. Her biometric data is still in the hard code. You have her eyes, Elena. Literally. The night of the heist was freezing. The wind off Lake Michigan whipped my hair as I stood on the edge of the Vance Tower, 60 stories up. Below, the city was a grid of golden light. Nolan checked my harness. Trust the gear. Trust me, he shouted over the wind. I looked at him. I trust you with my life. We ziplined across the abyss. For a moment, suspended in the dark, I felt weightless. I wasn't the victim of infidelity. I wasn't the grieving daughter. I was a warrior. We landed on the Golden Crest roof with a thud. We cut the glass, rappelled into the ventilation shaft, and dropped into the server room. It was silent, humming with the sound of corruption. Nolan stood guard while I approached the console. Retinal scan required. I leaned in. The red light scanned my eye. Access granted. Welcome, Administrator Serafina. Tears pricked my eyes. Even here, decades later, her legacy opened doors for me. I downloaded everything. Money laundering records, hit lists, bribes. It was enough to bury them for 1,000 years. We were exfiltrating when the alarm tripped. Security guards stormed the hallway. Go, Nolan yelled, shoving me toward the window. We rappelled down the side of the building as bullets shattered the glass above us. We swung into an open balcony on the 40th floor of our own building, crashing into the middle of the gala. Guests screamed. I stood up, covered in dust, clutching the hard drive. Lucas was there in seconds, flanking us. Do you have it? He asked. I held up the drive. Checkmate. The fallout was nuclear. The syndicate was dismantled. Dozens of high-ranking officials were arrested. The mystery of the Vance family tragedy was finally resolved in the public eye. But the most important moment came a week later. I sat in a private room at the airport. The door opened and an elderly woman walked in. She used a cane, and her face was mapped with wrinkles, but her eyes, they were my eyes. Serafina, my mother. She'd come out of hiding. The threat was gone. She stopped, looking at me with trepidation. I didn't know if you would want to see me, she whispered. After I left you, I didn't let her finish. I ran to her, wrapping my arms around her frail body. She smelled of lavender and old paper. She smelled like home. You didn't leave us, I sobbed. You saved us. We sat there for hours, 3 generations of Vance women, Serafina, me, and little Lily, playing at our feet. Lucas joined us, the 4 of us forming a circle of survival. Life is not a fairy tale. There are no perfect princes, and sometimes the castles are built on secrets. I learned that betrayal can break you, but it can also carve you into a shape that is stronger, sharper, and more resilient. I looked at Nolan, who was watching us from the doorway with a smile. I looked at Lucas, finally at peace. I looked at my mother, who had endured 25 years of loneliness for this moment. The white lilies at my wedding had smelled of rot. Yes, but the lotus grows from the mud. It pushes through the darkness, through the filth, and rises to the surface to bloom in the sun, unstained and magnificent. I am Elena Vance. I have been betrayed, I have been broken, and I have been reborn. And I finally know that the only love worth fighting for is the love that is willing to bleed for you. How did you feel about Elena's journey? If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I have many more stories about resilience and family secrets waiting for you, so don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story.